Hello, Mr. Payer, and welcome to Computer Science Chats. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you? How are you doing, Victor? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great as well. Thank you so much. So I've prepared several questions to ask you. First, could you please introduce yourself and your educational and career background?
Sure. I'm Franz Payer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cyber Skyline. My educational career background. I went to the University of Maryland for my computer science degree. My career background actually predates that a little bit. I kind of self-taught myself cybersecurity back in high school, and I had an internship working at this small government contracting firm called Tactical Network Solutions. And I was interning there for a couple of years. And then in college, I actually started Cyber Skyline in the dorm room my freshman year.
That's so great. Thank you so much. So what is it that inspired you to pursue cybersecurity as a career?
I always thought that cybersecurity had interesting puzzles. When I was self-teaching myself in high school, what really got me interested was I would spend a lot of time trying to find vulnerabilities in websites, and there was a lot of satisfaction in being able to, as like a high school kid, being able to like break into a system that supposedly someone with years of experience and a lot more technical like knowledge should have been able to secure. And I was just spending my time after school just fiddling around, and so I liked kind of like the fact that there was a puzzle there, and it was always, fun brain teaser to solve every single time I approached some sort of security challenge.
Thank you. Could you describe some of the activities that you do or did through your work?
So back at Tactical Network Solutions, I was working in embedded security. So before we had IoT, we just had connected devices and embedded devices. And so things like the IP cameras, those video cameras and Wi-Fi routers. And the company was doing a lot of research in finding vulnerabilities in those types of devices. It turns out that a lot of companies churn out new versions of their routers very, very quickly and don't really worry too much about the security. At least back then. Now I think they're a little bit better about it, but there's still a lot of challenges. And so we were doing research into finding those vulnerabilities. Now with Cyber Skyline, my primary focus is helping new students enter into the cybersecurity workforce. So at Cyber Skyline, we developed a platform for people to practice and develop their cybersecurity skills. And so it's a online platform where you get to go and perform real world cybersecurity tasks. So having people go through and look at log files and identify indicators of compromise, like really track down hackers, or maybe conduct an audit on a website. That was really kind of the experience I wanted to give people. And what we really found out is that when you have students who are going through their educational programs and then they're graduating, they're trying to look for a job, the most difficult component of that is being able to demonstrate their capabilities and their skills to employers. And so we see a lot of employers saying, how do I know that you can do this job? And they would prefer to hire someone with more job experience. And so what it really excites me about the work that we do is that we allow students to not only develop and build those skills, but also provide them with reporting that they can then provide to an employer and say, hey, I might not have many years of job experience, but I'm applying for the SOC analyst role, and I have gone through the process of actually like analyzing a log file, tracking down hackers, figuring out the vulnerable software versions, and it can actually speak to that in a job interview. And that's kind of like the big fulfilling thing that we get out of it is knowing that everything that we do, it's a part of helping someone on their career. And this is something that we do both for students. And then on the employer side, we provide these same types of hands-on activities as part of their hiring processes so that they don't have to be so reliant on the resume, because the resume is filled with a lot of bias. And it also means that people who don't have that job experience, they're not really being given the opportunities to prove that they have those skills, even if you've got really talented people out there.
That's great. So what do you like most and what do you find most challenging about your work at Cyber Skyline?
Well, I think I covered what I like the most. Yeah, truly the way that I kind of like measure the impact that we're making is every single time we've got a student who's graduated and they go get a job and they come back and they tell us, hey, I was able to get this job because of the program that I went through with you all, whether that be through the National Cyber League, which is this big national competition that we run for high school and college students, or through one of our skills assessments that we provide to employers. Yeah, just playing a role in that part of someone's career is just very rewarding. The most challenging aspect, I would say, is the fact that there are only so many things under your control. I mean, what we're trying to do is really push the industry in a different direction. We're pushing people to say not hire based on where people went to school, how many years of experience people have, but really focus on changing their practices to be in line with hiring talent as it's coming out of the school, or even people from non-traditional backgrounds. It's really, really hard to change people's minds and their processes. And so that is the biggest challenge. We can't force them to make those changes. All we can do is kind of advocate and get people excited and inspired to make those changes, to make their workforce more accessible to people with non-traditional backgrounds, to people who are beginners. And that's what keeps us busy all the time. So, it's a challenge, but we wouldn't be here if it wasn't a challenge.
Thank you. So I know you mentioned that you began studying cybersecurity in high school, and that ended up in you pursuing an internship at a government company. How did you gain the cybersecurity skills needed to become a software developer before going to college? And what would one need to do today to follow your path?
Well, I would definitely recommend you don't follow my specific path, but I can probably give some recommendations there. My specific path, I mentioned I was self-taught in high school. What started out for me was just generally an interest in building websites. And so I just went on Google and I searched how do I build a website? And through that process, I found out that you can break into websites. And that's kind of what led me down the cybersecurity path. And the way that I started out was actually by trying to find security vulnerabilities and different login pages of websites that I was using. And you can find all sorts of stuff back then, and now probably it's still the same. And so I was actually practicing by finding a vulnerability on a website and then trying to put in a report. So this is before bug bounty programs are really a thing. It was a lot more of a gray area. Companies didn't really have security policies about what you are and are not allowed to do, and how do you do responsible disclosure. So I wouldn't recommend it, because I was testing out on real websites of real companies, and the legal ramifications of that were probably not the best. But now I would say that if you wanted to follow a similar path, you could do that, but make sure that you're choosing websites that have a bug bounty program or some sort of responsible disclosure program, so you can follow their policies and understand what will they or will they not allow you to do when trying to find vulnerabilities on their website. And then what's the process for you to report it and do so in a legal and in a safe fashion. I think getting that type of hands-on experience is very important, because there's only so much you can gain from watching some videos and listening, reading some slides. I think a lot of the learning really comes from doing something yourself. And thankfully, there are a lot of different online, there's a ton of online resources available to give you hands-on experiences. One of the big things that I would recommend is actually cybersecurity competitions, capture the flag activities. So at Cyber Skyline, we run a bunch of these ourselves. And one of the big ones I mentioned is the National Cyber League. We see about 14,000 students who go through that every single year. Those are great opportunities for you to build those hands-on skills. And truly, I think there's no better way to learn than just going and doing it. And honestly, the reason why I started the company was because I wanted to learn cybersecurity. The only way I could do it is by breaking into real websites. And so I wanted to have a way to help teach my friends and other people in my program in college at the University of Maryland. I wanted to give them those hands-on experiences without doing so in a legally questionable fashion.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. So you mentioned you're the CEO of Cyber Skylines. So what is the difference in roles between like being a CEO and your previous work, working like under other people, like in your internship?
That's a great question. I think this isn't necessarily specific to CEO, but in any sort of leadership role, the biggest difference is you have to have a very different mentality in how you approach work, because when you are when you're just an employee and you don't lead other people, you are given objectives and you are just trying to figure out how can I meet those objectives in the best manner. Within the CEO role and any leadership role, I would say you have to have a very different mentality, which is not how do I optimize my capabilities for the objectives that we have, but how do I build objectives that are going to be compatible with my team? How am I building objectives that they are set up for success for, things that are going to be in alignment with their existing skills, things that are going to be in alignment with where their career path, what their career path is going to be. What are their interests? I've seen a lot of organizations where in their structure, you've got a manager who says, you do this task and you do it every day and you come back tomorrow, you're going to do it again. And there's no career growth and no trajectory for that individual. And so I think when you're looking at these leadership positions to be successful, it requires a lot of energy and thinking in terms of what are this person's capabilities today? What does the business need? And where do they want to go? And how can I align what their interests are with what the business needs, so that we're not just making sure that the company is being successful, but the individuals on the team are being successful. And that's just like a level of thinking that you don't have to do when you just are just given assignments. And just even coming up with those objectives is very difficult. When I took the CEO role, there is no one that's telling me, okay, you have to get this done by this deadline. And there's no one that's telling me, oh yeah, you did this wrong or you did this right. The way that we find that out is if we lose a customer or we or we gain a customer, right? There's no one that is giving you that feedback. You actually have to figure out, how do you collect that feedback? How do you process that feedback? And then how do you communicate what the business needs and align that with your team's capabilities? And honestly, I feel like I do a lot more thinking about others than about myself in this role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think the most important challenges in cybersecurity are right now?
So it's a very broad question. I feel like, I've got my opinion on it. I'd say like, take it for what it's worth. I'm definitely by no means a complete expert in this space. I come from a very specific perspective, which is on the talent perspective. And we hear all the time about the cybersecurity talent shortage and all of those problems with filling all these empty positions that we have. I think the most important challenge is actually looking at the way it's to have employers rethink about the way that they do their hiring, so that they can train that talent in-house. The way that I see hiring happening a lot right now is that companies are hiring people who can do all of the work on day one based on what the resume says. What basically happens here is that they can never find enough people who match exactly what resume they're looking for. You've got companies who are looking for people with 5 years of cybersecurity experience. Well, there are not that many people with 5 years of cybersecurity experience. And guess what? Everyone else is trying to hire people with 5 years of cybersecurity experience. And so if you're going to continue looking for people with 5 years of cybersecurity experience, you're never going to fill the open positions. and you're never going to have a sufficient team. And so what I would say here is the challenge is look at the hiring practices and improve those hiring practices to be able to fully develop a team that is adequately staffed so that the capabilities of the team match the needs of the organization. Right now, because there are these high requirements for hiring talent and there's not a lot of effort with training it up in-house, it means that teams are constantly understaffed. And it also means that those teams get overworked. Just because you don't have a full team doesn't mean your workload decreases. And so I've seen a lot of cases of people getting burnt out, wanting to switch into different jobs, wanting to switch into different careers because there's just too much stuff. And it's a shame because this is a very rewarding career and we need to bring more people into it, but there are a lot of barriers that are preventing it. And it's actually making it more difficult for the people that are currently in those positions because, like I said, the work doesn't stop just because you don't have a full team.
Thank you. So as a final question, where do you think that cybersecurity or computing in general is going to go in the future?
All right. So I'll preface this the same way I prefaced the other question, the other response. Definitely not an expert in this space. I'm sure I'm sure there are plenty other people who have a better expertise in here. But where I see this going in the future, I had a prediction, like I'd say probably 6 years ago, that AI is going to really solve cybersecurity, that AI is going to solve everything, and there isn't going to be this huge talent shortage anymore. What the past 6 years have showed me is that, yeah, we made a lot of advancements in AI, but that still doesn't solve the problem. And even when you're looking at ChatGPT, the new versions of AI that are coming out right now, they're still very susceptible to being abused. And there's a lot of bias in those systems, a lot of issues. And fundamentally, the data that goes into AI systems is what they optimize for. And so if they're not getting enough data, and if adversaries are specifically injecting the data that they want to put in there to trick the AI models, then those AI models are not going to work. They're going to fail. So what I kind of predict is going to happen in the future is a lot of attempts to try to solve everything in cybersecurity with AI, but kind of it falling short and still really requiring people who are not reliant on kind of those data models to do the critical thinking. I think that if AI could have solved a lot of this problem, then why do we need a lot of people who are cybersecurity analysts who are constantly looking for false positives? There's so many companies who have been trying to utilize AI, and I've been hearing a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, AI is going to change everything." I think it's going to do a lot to make people a lot more efficient, maybe cut down a lot of those like false positives that will show up in a security center. But I fundamentally, I don't think it's going to solve the problem. I still think it's going to require a lot of people to make sure that all of our systems are secure and work in connection with AI, things like ChatGPT. And I think truly the way that the industry kind of like moves into the future is in leveraging the existing talent and augmenting it with AI. And I think having to learn how to build a lot more of that talent in-house, because a lot of the specializations that you will get with how do we build an AI model for our use case might not translate as well into different organizations because they might have different priorities. And so I don't think AI can just generally solve everything. I think it's still going to require a lot of people with a lot of in-depth expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much for meeting with me and for being willing to do this interview.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to share my experiences.
Thank you.